Today's guest, we have strong, amazing representation from the Northeast. So I'm going to ask you all to say your names, your role in the youth sector, and 2 words to describe what meaningful youth engagement is to you.
Hello, I'm Kirsty Beeston. I'm a youth and community worker, currently working as the engagement manager at NCS Trust.
What does youth engagement mean to you?
Youth engagement, voice, power.
Amazing, nice. Alfie?
I'm Alfie Harrison. My role within the youth sector is I'd like to call myself a youth activist. Speak to them young people, engage on what they say. I'm also a youth worker in South Tyneside. My 2 words is opportunity and ownership.
My name is Rylie Sweeney and I'm a youth advisor working with lots of different companies to embed young people into policies across the government. And I would say my 2 words would be action and voice.
First question I'm going to ask is, what is co-creation? If someone's listening to this and they're like, what is co-creation? Like, what are we creating? What is co-creation when it comes to youth engagement?
I think youth creation for me is allowing young people and stakeholders and decision makers to come together and really work together to create something that works for everybody. It's not just about inviting young people to the table to listen, it's to act and to really create from what we hear, and making sure that everyone is involved in what we're creating for me.
That's amazing. And Alfie, you were there, I believe, at the Northeast Symposium. You were actually a host. You were doing your best. Like, it was amazing. It was incredible. Co-creation. So how did we co-create when it came to that event?
I think one thing that stood out for me from that event was how powerful the young people were on the day, how kind of young people heavy people were on the day, kind of making them stakeholders uncomfortable, which I think was a big thing on that day regarding co-creation and giving the opportunity to young people as well.
Amazing. And Kirsty, for anyone listening, is like, Youth Symposium, what's that? What is it, and how did we co-create with young people?
Yeah, I think for us at NCS, we have a really strong youth engagement function, and our young people, I guess, are very internal to the organisation. So I do think the stuff around like youth governance is really, really strong. And this year, part of the plan was how do we reach the regions to be able to hear what young people have to say to inform the work that we're doing, but also how can we use our platform, right, as an arm's length body to amplify young people's voices. Now, we were really, really careful about how we approach this, because as a national organisation, right, what you don't want to do is go into a region and be like, we're here to save the day, we're going to have a wonderful event and we're going to leave again, right? Mm-hmm. It's really disrespectful, it's not collaborative, and usually you're not capturing, the amazing work that's already happening, and that is much more embedded and much more systemic, right? That's really trying to kind of change. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to kind of work in partnership with the organisations who were already doing that work with young people, who had the trusted relationships with young people. We wanted to kind of understand what insights already existed, because we were big on kind of like, you don't have to repeat and ask the same questions. This is about moving forward and keeping that momentum going, that voice and momentum going. So actually, what are the gaps in knowledge? And we don't know that until we start understanding from young people, like what they've already said and what they've got to continue saying on those issues. So for us, we were really lucky that we had a partnership with Hope Collective, and NCS is like a partner in putting on Hope Hacks. So what we did in March last year, about a year ago, we had a Hope Hack, and we were very, very intentional about not recruiting schools, because this was about young people out of school settings. So we brought young people via the youth sector partners into that space. We brought the insights that we had pulled together, that young people, our youth engagement team, and Rylie, because we brought Rylie in as an advisor. The brilliant work she's doing with the Children's Commissioner puts her in a unique position to have a real big oversight of that youth policy and voice stuff, right?
Rylie, can you tell us more about your role as the Children's Commissioner Ambassador? Yeah.
Yes, so I've been an ambassador at the Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel D'Souza, for just over a year now. And what was really great for me with the North East Symposium was being able to really listen to young people and take it back to the Children's Commissioner office, and being able to, when I was in conversations with policymakers, meeting ministers, that I was really able to embed what I'd heard from the North East and for the young people in the room, and taking that back and making sure that they were at the forefront of that change that was happening. Obviously, we were having a new government as well, just after kind of we had the symposium, so it was really great to get in them first initial days of the new government and really kind of embed what I'd heard across the board.
That's amazing. And speaking of the youth symposium, Kirsty, you mentioned that as a national, NCS being a national organisation, we don't want to come in with like our shiny trophy, like here we are. I want to go to you, Alfie, being from that region, the North East. How would you have felt if organisations come and it's like present themselves in a way that is not engaging for young people?
I think it's frustrating, especially the North East, because it's a region that gets spoke about, but nothing ever happens. It's a region that everyone wants to help. Everyone loves the image of helping the North East, but when it comes to actually making a change, it actually doesn't actually happen. I think you to go to all these events and you speak to all these people. Yes, we want to change the North East. Still waiting. And it's so frustrating because I don't feel it, but I still class myself as a young person. And I've done it myself. Give my opinion and you never say anything. And I'm not saying my opinion is always right, but as a collective, the more opinions we get off young people should, in theory, make that change. But it unfortunately doesn't happen.
And that's upsetting to hear, because you're also representing young people that feel that way as well. Because I'm sure you're not the only young person that feels that way. And that frustration can be carried through a community. Kirsty, I want you to speak to those organisations that are basically consulting young people and like leaving it there. That's why I feel like, I shared my opinion, but there's actually no action coming from it. I want you to speak to those organisations and just differentiate consultation from co-creation. Like what's the difference between those two?
Yeah, it's power, isn't it? It's the ability to kind of understand that you're not the expert, and actually, a 15-year-old's an expert at being 15, an 8-year-old's an expert at being 8. And ultimately, you have to kind of let your ego go, really, really kind of meet a young person where they're at. And you have to go into a conversation and a dialogue with no agenda. It's about kind of having a collective understanding that you're wanting to change something, that you can't go in, you're going to help me do this, you're going to help me do that. That's not co-creation. That's not youth-led. We've got to stop using that language and labelling it as that. And I think we need to challenge back on that stuff as well, because it's been bandied about too much at the minute. I think we genuinely have to understand that as adults, as organisations in any sectors, if you want to do something with young people, you go in and have a dialogue, you share power, you look at the structures and the barriers that are in place. It has to be equitable. And sometimes it's not about creating something new. And sometimes it's not about developing solutions. Like we had a young person on the panel, so powerful, Sam, and he talked about, actually it's just doing what you've promised to do. It's fixing what's possibly broken and following through with what you've said. It's not about kind of changing and doing something different. And there was loads of mic drop moments at the symposium where young people just said it how it was. They came with their experience. We hadn't given them agenda and said, talk about this in particular or this. It was like, what are you doing right now? What matters to you? There's the stage. How do you want to do it? We want to do a rap. We want to do an art piece. We want to do that. Great. We'll throw some money your way so we can bring the artists in to help you and facilitate that voice. But it was about creating a stage, bringing the right audience in the room. So if they were talking about health, we went for the health people, the policy people. We brought them there and we were like, look, there you go, talk to them. We were just convening the space and we were trying as an organisation, and I'm sure we could do better, to share power and to share, to create that opportunity for dialogue. And I think it is hard, right? It is hard, and people do have agendas and timescales. But if you genuinely want to co-create, go into it with this could be magical, because actually young people don't have the same restrictions as we do. They will come up with brilliant ideas, but kick your ego out the room and just go into it. equally and share power.
Yeah, kick your ego out the room. I love that because you talked about the importance of like just having open dialogue and not coming with an agenda set and just getting young people in a space just to hear, yes, that's an amazing idea. But it's like young people can have a completely different view and usually always have a completely different view to adults. So I want to go to you, Rylie. You've been in a lot of decision-making spaces. How does it feel when there's an agenda set and that open dialogue conversation isn't there?
It can be really frustrating. And I think for me, I always say that young people should be consulted at the very beginning. Welcome me into a room at the very beginning of something and allow me and young people to shape the direction and shape where we're going and the influence at the very beginning. Don't come to young people with this is what we've created, this is what we're trying to do. No, like we need to kind of be engaged from the very, very beginning and allowing young people to have the power to influence the direction that we're heading. And then also bringing it back, it's that feedback loop. Don't just then walk away and young people don't know what's happened with it. Check in, make multiple touch points with these young people. Okay, so you said this, we did. Did we get this right? Do we need to go back? Okay, great, we can move on to the next part. You said we did, and this is then what we created at the end. I think that's ultimately what's really powerful of kind of engaging at the beginning and engaging throughout so that the piece is truly reflective of young people.
That is so true. And I'm gonna bounce off what you said, Rylie. Alfie, if there was just like an open like scope, what would you want to see more of? Not just in the youth sector, but in all sectors in general, when it comes to that open dialogue and that feedback loop. What would you want the adults to know?
I think the big thing is collaboration. I think we put too much ownership on young people to be comfortable. I think it's about kind of getting them young people to meet other young people. It might make them feel uncomfortable, but it will solve that bigger issue. It will kind of bringing all them young people together will make that solution bigger. So I think collaboration's a massive one in that respect. And I think my biggest kind of pet peeve in collaboration in that respect is organizations collaborate, but young people don't. And I think in that respect of like, you're here to help young people, but it's the managers who are collaborating with each other, not the young people. And I think, well, if you want young people to work together, you've got to get the space for them to meet each other and kind of work with each other and kind of, I'd like to see more collaboration, I think especially from the Northeast. I think there needs to be more collaboration within local authorities. And I think if that comes, I think that only kind of stems like regionally. So I think the biggest thing is collaboration.
Collaboration. And Kirsty, what's your experience with that? Because Alfie's saying it's the adults that are collaborating, but they're not convening that space for young people to collaborate. What's been your experience?
You think the adults are collaborating? Might be meeting, not necessarily collaborating.
Meeting, not collaborating.
I think just to say, I think that bit about being uncomfortable is really key. And I think, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is the really great space to be in.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes what happens is it goes back to that agenda thing. So everybody's got a job, there's a new policy out or there's a bit of funding. So they get together and like, what can we develop? What can we fix? What have we got? Oh, we've got this group of young people, or I've got a young person I can bring in. And I guess what I'm hearing, and I think it's exciting, is that, and if you look at the Lundy model, right, it's about spaces for young people. So it's just those open access spaces where young people can have dialogue. Rylie and I were talking earlier about developing those critical thinking skills, like how much of young people's lives are constructed, they're on curriculum, they're kind of given structures of what they've got to learn, what they've got to talk about. Everything seems very, very like you're moving through different things that are given. But where are those collective spaces where you can come together, that social cohesion piece, right? And just learn from each other and discuss. And actually, the adults need to be there. Like it's that thing of adults have got to be there to safeguard and do that. And it's like, yeah, 100%. Like all of those things really matter. But young people make friends with each other without you there. They do that as children. They go in soft play and they make friends and they get in battles and they figure it out and they become friends and they learn kind of skills. It's the same thing with young people. It's like, why have we always got to control spaces? Why have we always got to create the agenda? We can have safety. We can have all of that in place and just let young people talk, figure it out, have a dialogue. And then when they invite us in, right, when they invite us, not when we invite them, we listen and we hear. And then you start to think, what can I do? What can't I do? I'm really honest, can't do anything about that right now. Might know someone who can try and help you. But what can we do? How do we wrap around that? How do we wrap around our young people to build them up to be able to speak and develop the skills and the confidence and the right networks to be able then to be heard and make change happen? I feel like it's the wrong way round, right? And I don't know necessarily the answer, but I just feel like adults kind of need to get out of the way, right? There's a role for us, but we're taking up too much of young people's space. Like I'm speaking too much right now, right?
It's facts. No, you're speaking facts though. Because I think when you're talking about that control piece, that's when it's like you're creating a box, and that's when that box adults want to tick it. It's like that's why youth engagement can be tokenistic in so many ways, because that control environment, okay, let's do a survey, let's do a focus group, let's get these young people in the spaces, in the like context that we're comfortable with, but not necessarily like just empowering them to like meet each other. Like you said, I love that example. Young people make friends on their own. Like maybe you might get the parents like, oh, go and make friends with this person, but like the friends that you keep are the friends that you just like go out there and make on your own. So I want to come to you, Rylie, in the sense of when it comes to like tokenistic youth engagement, what encouragement do you have for those organizations? Because Kirsty, you mentioned the Lundy model, and in the Lundy model it says that tokenism is okay to start there but don't stay there. So when it comes to youth organizations who are like tokenistic at the moment, what's your like encouragement to them?
Yeah, I think with the tokenisticness, if that's a word, great one. I would say it really insults a lot of young people at times, and I know like our figures at the Children's Protection Office shows that only 1 in 5 young people believe that people actually, like decision makers actually care about what young people say. And that's that tokenistic piece, because things are not being actioned, and I think it's better to kind of have, I think, quality over quantity and really kind of get that meaningful engagement and really get it right in one area. Really focus on kind of one meaningful place to start and get it right, and then expand from there.
Yeah. And once the adults have started expanding, Alfie, in your experience, where can they go from there? Like, how can they better engage young people? Like, what actually works?
Food. We've chuck some food in young people's face and they'll go for it. It is, yeah. No, I think I think from the perspective of the like to engage young people, I think it's about adults understanding for young people it's the short-term goals, not the long-term goals. Because really, see, if you look, you want a young person for that long in that respect. So it's no point in getting them young people to try and change the future for young people for 30 years, because that isn't realistic for them. Yeah. But changing the next 4, changing their next 4, by the time they get to 18, it's a big cycle. Then they help the next lot. They help changing the next 4 years. I think there's too much ownership on, this might feed from the government and national strategy, but like things being spanning for like 10 years. And I think, well, what's the point? Because by the time that finishes, young people aren't young people anymore. Let's make it for 3 and 4 years. Let's make change, because come 3 or 4 years, there's going to be new issues. There's going to be new problems. And then people who are like kind of coming to the end of being young people, you use them to support the next lot coming through. So I think a big thing as well in the youth sector is forget about the long-term goals. It's short-term goals in that respect.
Well, I love that, because it's like, by the time the future comes, you're no longer a young person. I don't think people realize that. Kirsty, why do you think that's a thing where we're doing these 10, 20-year plans when young people won't be young anymore?
And often the people who make those decisions are not also around anymore, and governments change quicker than 10 years as well. So I think sometimes the authenticity or belief that something that you say is going to stick for 10 years isn't there. And young people, they're not daft, right? They're not going to take part in something that doesn't feel authentic and that is genuinely going to have impact. They're like, in 10 years, I'll be like 25. And also, I've seen, if you think about, in the last, 5 years, what they've seen in their lives, COVID, Brexit, like I don't know, like different people, like the Queen and the King, and it's so much change, right? So much change. So I don't know, I think it's nice to have something sustainable. And I think when it comes for funding, I would say that lots of organisations would say, stop giving us short-term funding, give us long-term funding so that we can really engage the work. So that's important from a funding perspective. From a policy perspective, I guess it's the same thing, right? You want something that's long and deep and going to be embedded. I guess the issue with that is, where's the commitment from everybody that if you're going to create something, everybody sticks to it? And I guess I am talking about like policies there as well, because if it's just something that's created by people who then are not in power, that they change it and then it changes again, then you have a lot of, you have young people who start to just feel like, well, this isn't authentic, this won't be carried through, this won't be sustained. And they start to lose faith in the adults making decisions and the policies that are about them, but might not kind of include them properly. So going back to that, like sharing power, being consulted on something is not co-production, right? It is not at all. When you're just asked to fact check stuff or just to comment on pre-made decisions, and if it is about something so far in the future, you're like, what's the point? The decision's been made anyway. You haven't asked me, and actually it won't affect me. So I think it's about how you approach that partnership with a young person, the authenticity and the intention. And mostly that's about kind of telling the truth. We're doing something in the plans for 5 years, but going to be honest with you, if another mayor comes in, that might change, right? But what I'm going to try and do is get support of a range of people to make sure that that's committed to, that there's a covenant, like there's something there. I just think it's about, if the intention's right and the honesty's there and young people go, right, we trust you, we believe you, that's when you move forward. And that's often, I think, what's missing.
Just to build on that as well, I think from like a young person's perspective, if someone goes to a young person and says, right, let's make something for 5 years, it may not last 5 years, but by 2, we will be this far through.
Yeah.
So don't promise the end result. Think about kind of 2 years, kind of the many issues that are going on at the minute. Yes, we want it to stop by 5 years, we want that. But realistically, like Kirsty's saying, things will change. But by 2 years, what can be achievable within the 2 years? And then I think if people are more honest around that, there'll be a better buy-in from young people.
So true. And Rylie, what's been your experience with that authenticity piece? Because Kirsty's clearly saying, and there's experience, there's evidence that it's missing, especially when it's at that like high level decision making. What's been your experience with authenticity being missing?
Yeah, I think it can be really difficult, and it's sometimes actually blatantly obvious. And I feel like people don't realise that it is, but young people aren't stupid, they're not daft, they know, and what's been said before. And I think young people are becoming increasingly frustrating about it. And I think for me, I have been lucky to go in lots of different rooms and advocate for young people. And I myself and the people around me have had to make it meaningful, and we've had to walk in the room knowing that it's going to be tokenistic, but we can get something out of it and we can make it meaningful while we're there. And that shouldn't have to happen, but it does happen. And I think one thing that like I really try and push is, it's okay letting us in the room, but then we have to really have the space to be able to contribute meaningfully, and you have to be able to listen, and you can't put your barriers up. And I'm going to be just as kind of authentic as well and say, if that's not my bag, if I don't know something, or we maybe need to bring more young people into this, we also can hold our hands up and say, maybe I don't know, but they have to be able to do that too.
And you've touched on barriers. I want to go to you, Alfie. In your experience, just speaking from kind of like what you've been through, especially in the Northeast, what are some of the barriers preventing young people from even entering the door and saying, oh, I want to be part of this?
Opportunities, but provided equal opportunities. I think that's a big thing for me, especially in the Northeast, because of where I come from in South Tyneside. It is very low deprived area, considering if you look at Newcastle as a whole. And I think a lot of these people that get the opportunities are from them areas that are probably a little bit more wealthy and I think, but you always hear the same thing from them areas. I think if we start targeting and giving equal opportunities for the full of the Northeast, I think you'll see a little bit more of a better response and a better opinion. And you never know, you might see a better change come from that. You never know until you try it, which is another thing I think needs to happen more often. You don't know until you try it. What's the harm in trying it?
And Kirsty, practically, as in your experience of youth work, how can youth workers, organisations make opportunities equal for young people?
Do you know what? I think youth work is really struggling. Youth work's not struggling. The youth sector's really struggling right now, right? And I think there's some absolutely amazing youth work practice in the Northeast, right? Amazing people doing great things. It's one of the highest hit areas in terms of funding. It's also one of the highest areas in the country for NEET young people, for child poverty. NEET stands for not in education, employment and training. And the statistics are not great, right? And you've got a sector that has basically been working pretty much in crisis mode for a really long period of time. You've got schools who are also doing the same, right? I mean, we've normalised things like mattress given in schools, like for children who don't have beds at home, and having like food banks in schools. And then you've got the youth sector going out and taking like necessities and food parcels to families as well. And they're dealing with really serious, like, young people who are affected by criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation. They're working in crisis mode. The workforce is depleting. There's not often full-time jobs for youth workers, and they're battling for funding that isn't there. It's how long do you keep on going without breaking? So while the youth sector will always, right, especially youth work, right, and it's different, obviously, because you've got youth work, youth workers, trained profession, but then you've also got other organisations who work in the youth sector, who come from sports, coaching, wherever. But I think pretty much across the board, people value youth voice and participation. I think they genuinely want to work in partnership with young people. I don't know that they ever really get the space or the opportunity to create the space for young people to have those authentic kind of dialogue conversations, which then build, and the time then to support them to go, right, well, how can your voice influence change and action? Because it just feels like the sector just feels a bit broken, because as a sector, they're not getting necessarily listened to around youth work's really important. We talk about a mental health crisis, we talk about stuff going on. Actually, if more youth work was in place, it would take away the pressure from those services. The battles that they're having are at that level, which means they can't raise their head up and almost create those opportunities, even though we know that youth voice in those spaces is really powerful, because that's how you learn from young people and make the changes happen. I just think there's a horrible cycle going on now of the youth sector working in crisis mode and young people using services that, let's face it, as a society, we should never be seeking some of the support that they need. And I think what that means then is, you don't necessarily have the space, the time, the resources to do that convening piece, create those spaces for young people, create that opportunity for them to come to get together with other groups of young people. Like South Tyneside and Newcastle are not far away, but you'll have kids who've never ever gone into Newcastle. They've never rode that metro that far in. They haven't crossed the Tyne as well. There's something really local about young people's experiences, and the Northeast is a really interesting region. I do think devolution will help. I do think having that power in the region and people in the region who know the region, collaborating and making decisions can really change stuff. But when national policy comes and takes over regional policy, it blows it out the water.
Thank you both for giving context to the struggle that the sector is currently going through. Just to bring some hope, I want to ask Rylie, for a young person, whether from the Northeast or another region, that's experiencing basically the negatives of what's happening in the current society, how can they still use their voice? How can they actually engage in any youth participation? What advice would you give to them?
I think it's young people need to realise that their voice is really powerful, and their voice matters and their opinion matters, and their lived experiences are more valuable than any politician can bring to the table. And I believe that young people really need to start in their communities, and they can start having a voice in their communities, and don't just sit and really try and stand up for what you believe. Don't be a bystander, and trying to advocate within your own community and speaking to the network around and speaking to the different organisations and other people in your area. And yeah, I think it's just realising that your voice is powerful, and although it's not always received well, we'll get there hopefully one day, but we just have to keep fighting.
Yeah, keep fighting. And Alfie, I want to come to you. So a young person that's from your community that thinks, like Rylie said, their voice doesn't matter. What advice would you give to them? And also, practically, what can they actually get involved in?
I think do it yourself. I think that is a massive thing. I think as a young person, I think, and I've been lucky with the kind of the settings and the people I've met. But for some young people that haven't, I think start taking ownership. I think as much as people call social media a big bad world and a big thing that should stop, it's ruining lives. It's probably the most powerful tool out there if young people just start going on there and getting their voice heard on social media. You might not kind of get your point across, but start being more active on social media about showing your voice. I think it's a massive tool that I think everyone should use better. I think that is the key thing. I do think there is some things with social media, but I think in terms of youth voice and advice, do it yourself, but go on social media and get things out there on social media. You'll hit more people than you could ever imagine.
True. Be bold and just go out there. I like that. And to Kirsty, kind of like the accountability piece for the sector, what advice would you give to those adults who are listening to young people? So young people are now at that point where they're bold enough to like voice their opinions, but those adults are doing nothing with what they're hearing. Like, what advice would you give to those adults?
It's two sides of it, isn't it? So there's the adults who can support young people to have their voices heard. So that thing about how do young people get their voices heard, like I can automatically in my brain go, well, you could like get involved in UK Youth Parliament, you could speak to someone like the Children's Commissioner, you could talk to your regional youth work unit, Youth Focus North East to the North East. Like there are organisations out there that will have some system process for voice, right? But if young people don't know about that, then how do they access that? So it's super important that we kind of elevate those spaces and opportunities as well. Like if we know that, then we're responsible for sharing that, right? And then the other side of it is responding. Like everybody can respond, right? So if you're like, oh, that was a really important point that you made, Alfie, I can't do something about it, but I know someone who does, you tag them in, right? Or you kind of go, oh, did you know about something that's going on? So there's the connectors, isn't there? Like that networking piece is the power piece. Someone always knows someone or someone else. And sometimes people are bystanders in watching a debate happen and being like, I wonder if that young person had spoken to them. It's like, well, respond then. You're part of it. You can be a connector. And then you've got the people who have the power, right? And if you're reading something that young people is written and it's relevant to you and you've got some authority in doing something about it, don't ignore it. Like, even if it's just like acknowledging that young person's voice, like that was a really interesting point. I've never thought about it before. Or actually, did you know we're already doing stuff about that? Like, do you want to read this? But if you just ignore it, like it's the height of rudeness, isn't it? It's one way to make young people feel really, really like small about themselves. Like, how do young people grow confidence to have their voice heard when they're being ignored?
I want to go to you, Rylie and Alfie, your experience of like your starting point, because you're doing amazing work now, but where did you start from? Like, before you got involved in like the different opportunities to be involved in decision making, youth participation, youth engagement, where did you start from and how did your confidence grow over time?
I started about 3 years ago when I left school, and it was inspired by me really struggling in school. So I was told I'd never achieve anything in school. And I really struggled to engage. And actually I realised that there's not the only young person who's going through this. And I was quite lucky to have a lot of confidence and a voice, and I knew that I needed to stand up for what other young people were feeling. So I started as a youth advisor with the Cruise Enterprise Company. And that's really where my advocacy started. And because I was truly listened in that space and it was really meaningful engagement, I was like, I can do this. It only takes one experience for young people to have where the voice is truly valued that sparks that passion. And it kind of tumbled and it grew, and I spoke to more young people, and I realised that it's not just education that young people are struggling. There's some heartbreaking stories out there what young people are going through. And while I'm in them spaces and the other young people are struggling to get in them, I can either bring them forward or I can take their voices in that room, and that's really important for me. And then I kind of became the youth advisor to the Children's Commissioner for England, which was a fantastic opportunity, which connected me to a whole other network, which then again, I was really able to not just advocate for my views, but advocate for young people across the country.
Nice, that's incredible. What about you, Alfie?
I think for me, it started at 13. I started volunteering in a youth club at 13, and it was weird for me at the time because most of the kids were my age. But it was something I was really passionate about, and I was lucky enough to do it in the community I've been brought up in and I still live in. And then I've met some amazing people along the way, and one person in particular, because I was like nervous about continuing, they said, well, what can go wrong? What is the worst thing that can happen? I wasn't the best in education, but I could come out of education, go to my youth club, and I could make a difference to them young people. I think that was one thing that I was really passionate about. And then through the youth work, it then span across the Northeast. I started working with a skills-based charity called The Key, which kind of led to more opportunities, i.e. the role I'm in now, which is sadly coming to an end with the Youth Advisory Board for NCS, and that stemmed from opportunities through The Key. But I always look back, and if anyone asks, it is always that one chat with that one person who said, well, what can go wrong? What is the worst that could happen?
That's amazing. That is incredible. I remember hearing someone say that like failure is literally, it's just a lesson. Yeah. And like success is a lesson as well. So it's just, you learn from it and you grow. And I'm glad you guys are here today, because it's like, it just shows like the growth and the confidence, because I never would have thought you guys like struggled in education. People might look at you and be like, oh yeah, they're well educated kind of thing. They never had any struggles. But to hear your like story, it's just encouraging to another young person to say that no matter where young people are starting from, your future can be bright. It's, don't be scared to fail. Don't be scared to fall. You can grow from it. But Kirsty, I want to come to you. I don't think I've ever like had your reason for why youth voice, why youth engagement. Like, what got you into it?
Why youth engagement? I mean, I'm from the Northeast. I'm from a town called Peterlee, and I was lucky enough to go to university, doing an art degree. Got there and felt like a fish out of water. But when I went back home again, people treated me differently because I'd kind of left. And it was just this weird thing where I just felt really displaced. And I guess for me, like, I then started volunteering for Western Spirit. And I again was like you, Alfie, I was the age of some of the young people I was working with. And I got the opportunity to go to Cambodia and do VSO. And my world started opening up. But then my world back in my environment was different, because you see things and you have the experience, and it was really, really, really difficult. And I think that voice piece then becomes really powerful. So I was really lucky to work in a project called Durham Children and Young People's Council. That was my first like youth work role, and I went back and studied youth work. And that was a Save the Children project, and Save the Children's all about children's rights. So I was just like, my mind was blown. It's powerful. This is genuinely about like young people creating their own future, having their voices heard, being involved in decision making. Just that there was this organisation there that was upholding that, and I was working with these managers who were brilliant. They used to just sit with me and talk. I had so much dialogue with them and was able to figure things out in my brain. And then as a young youth worker, I was working with young people and helping them through the Durham Youth Council and through school youth councils to develop their own projects. So my whole career has been youth participation, but it came from a really personal place of being that young person and like feeling lots of feelings and feeling a certain way, being taken out of the pond that I was in, and then going, I don't know how to cope because I thought that was the world and I couldn't make sense of it. And I think I grew with the young people I was working with in a way, but Youth Voice is just central to it all. And I never ever want to lose that in my career. If I ever feel like I don't really do youth work anymore, but if I ever feel like I'm not listening to young people, then I know I'm not getting it right. I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, I hear that. This has been an amazing conversation. I love this. And I just want you guys to give one piece of advice. If you could, there's loads of advice you can give, but one piece of advice to organizations that are trying to do co-creation. What is one thing you would say to them?
I'll start with engage at the very beginning and allow young people to really shape the direction that you're heading. Don't just bring them a finished piece.
Practice makes permanent. No one knows everything. Keep practicing, keep learning. Every situation is different. The more you practice, the more permanent something comes. Nothing's ever perfect, but it will become permanent.
You can be the adult that is the one adult that sparks it for a young person. Like, sometimes you never realize that you're the catalyst. All you've got to do is say the right thing and listen and do something, and actually that can be the growth. So never take for granted that moment in time with a young person. And then I think in terms of co-creation, yeah, genuinely, like if you're going to develop something, where's the young people? Ask yourself, where's the young people? When you're writing the list of people who need to be involved, developing a program, winning funding, writing a policy, you look around, where's the young people? And if they're not there, you're not ready to start yet.
I think one more thing in it is what it probably could be one of my favourite sayings, in the sense of you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Let's start using the ears and then use that mouth to act on what they've said.
I love that. Amazing. And we're done. I love that. Thank you so much.